I am Laura Camacho, communication coach, introvert, not a native good negotiator, but I have learned to negotiate, and I'm super excited to introduce my friend and colleague Peter Arnstein to you. I was really, when I met him a few months ago and found out he used to be an investment banker, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's got it. He's going to be great for my people to talk about it, negotiating, because investment bankers, they buy companies, and we've all seen the Wolf of Wall Street, right? So that's kind of like the typical investment banker, right?
Typical.
Right.
Pretty much typical.
Pretty much typical. That's what I thought,
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter, he attended Stanford. He's been to Wharton. He's lived in Charlotte, New York, Chicago, other places. Hey, Laura Lee. Hi, Lisa. Hey, Sarah. I'm just introducing Pete a little bit, and please remember to ask us any questions on the chat. If there's anything specific you want to learn, let us know. I have Peter on a very short leash here, so that should be helpful. He is not an introvert. I don't think he does talk a lot. So if he talks on to one topic too much, I'm going to rein him in.
Although I will say, and I see Lisa Olszewski online, I was telling Laura that Mrs. Hollifer in second grade wrote on my report card, which my mother still has, that she was concerned that I was so quiet.
Well, you got over it. She did a good job of helping you get out of your shell, as they say. So before I hand the reins over to Peter, I want to tell everybody one quick story about my experience with negotiating, which has been mostly really bad for the first 30 years of my life. But in 2009, when I was let go at East Carolina University, the economy was bad. I will say I was going to quit anyway, eventually, but all the adjunct faculty were let go, and I got an offer from college in Charleston, which was very fortunate. It was a very bad economic time. I was scared. I was going through a divorce, but still I practiced what I preach, and I asked for more. And even though they gave me a very nice offer, very generous for universities at the time, and I asked for more, and much to my surprise, the guy didn't get upset, he didn't get angry, he didn't get mad at me. He said, let me see what I can do. And while he didn't give me everything I asked for, he definitely improved the terms, which has helped, which was super helpful. So Peter, I'm going to put on the slides about your company. Why don't you start telling them a little bit about how you became this amazing negotiator?
I am still becoming, and always will become, because the journey never ends. Dynamic Leadership Development, which is my company, has clients hire us because they want to do what they do better, and they want to get better at the doing. They typically come to us when they are uncomfortable, facing a big challenge, or perhaps stressed to the point of not knowing what to do and how to do it next. So the topics that we cover are listed on this, among others. They aren't discrete. They're often all tied up in the same thing, or bring in other areas that we can address. Typically, the context that I work with clients is in a work context, but as y'all know, that overlaps into life outside of work. So it's an integrative process, and I work through workshops, one-on-one coaching. The best work takes place over time.
All right. You want to talk about?
So sure. And just to set the table, in this fairly short period of time, what should be people's takeaways from this discussion? And my goal is to just have you if you can take one thing away from this and then use it going forward, that's fantastic. One takeaway: negotiation and bargaining takes place all the time in many contexts. It's not what often people think of when they see the word negotiation, of people sitting in suits across the table from each other. Anybody who has tried to feed dinner to a reluctant 3-year-old knows the challenge of negotiation. And I will take advice from people. Our kids are older, but eventually I may be at it again. Takes place all the time. It's important for people to understand, to identify their strengths and weaknesses. Not everybody's going to be good at everything. How you are and what you take into a negotiation is an important part of your strategy and tactics. Careful planning, just like so many things, people have to do their homework. Good negotiators plan carefully, do their homework, and they follow an information-based approach. The more information typically one goes into a negotiation with, and the more planning, the better off their outcomes are going to be. It's important to practice. This is not a discipline where you can listen to a guy on a webinar and look at slides and then go away being great at it. Takes practice, just like so many other skills.
Yeah, and I just want to interrupt. I'm going to jump in here. I just want to hope that you'll come away with the motivation to like practice becoming a better negotiator and to look for opportunities to ask for things, because you do get better and you get over this fear of, because, you know, some people like me, we feel like we're going to be, it's inappropriate to ask for more than what's being offered to you. So,
yep. And then within that, it's important to be yourself. Like so many things, if you are forcing it, first of all, you won't be as effective as you could be if you're yourself, and your counterparty will notice it, and that will adversely affect their interest and ability in working with you. So those are the takeaways. The point of this slide is there are foundations to negotiating. We've listed them here: styles, goals, and expectations, standard and norms, relationships, other parties' interest and leverage. There are psychological bases for these. Again, this is to point out that negotiation is not a mechanical, structured process all the time. That many of the drivers of the outcomes of negotiation in the process have to do with individual and group psychology. I'm not going to read them all. I think there are a couple of things to point out. One is, people may ask, what's your bargaining? How do I know what my bargaining style is? And I'm going to refer to Richard Schell's Bargaining for Advantage. It's a book. He was a professor at Wharton. I participated a number of years ago in a workshop that he gave, a standard workshop. It was great. And before I embarked on this project on negotiation, we had a great chat that lasted a long time, and he was very helpful in this. So that informs much of what I'm saying here. It's point. So he has in his book a questionnaire that you can go through. And if you go online, there are other types of self-assessments specifically with respect to negotiation and bargaining. If anybody's interested, we can talk about it later offline. I want to make a point about goals and expectations. That is a very important point to take away. And most good negotiators and most people who teach negotiation really focus on that. What is a goal? A goal is what you want to take away. What is an expectation? An expectation is something without which you would be really disappointed. And the practice is to, once you've determined what your goal is, and the advice is to reach for the goal, to really focus on that goal during your planning and your strategizing and when you go to the bargaining table. have somebody else think about that expectation, because that's often one's fallback and the minimum need to have. If you think about that expectation, that minimum as you negotiate, chances are you are not going to do as well, because you won't take the chances to get you to your goal. That's a really important item.
I want to ask a question. So if you were to like, somebody were to tell you, oh, I want you to meet Sally, she's a really good negotiator, what would that mean to you?
What would it mean to me if somebody's a really good
negotiator? Like, what does that look like to you? Because it seems like there's just so many variables and it's so context related. So is there such, I mean, there has to be such thing as a good negotiator to me as somebody who is able to get what she wants. That to me is impressive.
And the message is there are many ways to get there.
Okay.
There are a short handful of characteristics of people typically who get good results from negotiation that we've talked about. They know themselves and they have worked out what is effective in a negotiation. They've done their homework, so they collect the information and are very thorough and comprehensive. They plan the strategy. So when I say Sally, if she's a good negotiator, she will, all of these things will be in her
like
toolbox.
She knows her strengths and weaknesses. She knows what she wants. She's done her homework.
She has studied the counterparty.
Right.
So a major foundation for successful negotiation is to understand the other party. Get as much information on their background, on their style of negotiation, on what historically they've negotiated about and how they've done it. And we've talked about, well, what if nothing's public? What if nothing's available? One can go and try to talk to people who are familiar with that party. So Sally will have studied her party, and then she will be very good at the bargaining table, at being present, listening to her counterparty, and not only listening to the substance and content of what they say, but we'll be looking for visual clues. Body language.
Yes.
How, if it's more than one person in that negotiation, Sally will be looking at how the team interacts. Often there's somebody who's not doing all the talking, but you can tell in their eyes and their body language that they're the one who's done most of the homework and has formulated it. That's somebody, if, for example, you have a breakout session, you or one of your team members can start to develop a relationship with. Those kinds of things. So those are what a good negotiator brings to the table. And it fits a lot of different contexts, and it fits a lot of different types of people. I will say that some very successful senior executives, they choose to avoid negotiation. And instead, it's just not their thing. They're not good at it. Clearly, their value to the organization is to bring a whole lot of other skills. So they will have somebody else do the negotiating for them. And that is a practical, reasonable approach.
Well, it is for that senior executive, but if you're low on the totem pole and you deserve a raise and you haven't gotten it,
you gotta go to bat for yourself.
Yes, you do. You absolutely do. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the situation of asking for a raise?
I do, because a lot of people ask me, and I have the things that I tell them. And you talk about knowing yourself, and you can feel like you're in a weak position, that they could fire you, that they could let you go, that you don't have any cards. So how, what's the best way to prepare for asking for a raise when you know that you've been delivering and over delivering, and nobody's even like I used to be, where like resentful because I thought if you ask me to do more and more and more, then you should be offering me more money. Was in my poor, feeble, unbusinesslike brain.
Oh, no.
That's what I was thinking. So I got over that. But so let's walk through asking for a raise.
First of all, you and I, first of all, let's start out with you. And you and I talked about this a little bit before. We said, what is the optimal timing?
Yes, timing is good
So
thing with that.
you said, let's just say you've interviewed to take on a new job at a different organization. When's the best time to negotiate? Well, it's after you've received an offer and before you've accepted.
Well, that's with the new job. Absolutely.
With a new job.
Yes.
That's the point. We talk about leverage. There are many different types of leverage. That's one, timing, where you have the ability to say yes or no, and relative to where you are, you're not losing anything other than the opportunity to be employed by that company.
Right, and generally, even if you ask for something and they can't give it to you, they're going to try. But the thing is, the statistics show that at least 80% of women never ask for more when they're offered a job, and it could be even higher because I know it just doesn't occur. We're so happy to get the job that we don't think about asking for more. And we're sabotaging, and the effect of that is the snowball. It's cumulative. It's terrible.
All I can say, for whatever it's worth, is the two women in my family that I'm closest to, my wife Judith and my daughter Mary Alice, both negotiate. And they're both tough to negotiate.
Well, good for them, as they should be, and as we can be. It's just a matter. I think it's really of awareness. If you like, my mom was an English teacher, so I didn't grow up seeing my mom negotiate anything, and she was a very shy, quiet person.
And I think culturally, women, most people point out, it's because they are collaborative and focused on process and cooperation. Don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
But once you know that, then you can, as you did, you can address it.
Exactly.
In the job, the best, and every organization is different with respect to how compensation and other non-monetary compensation is figured out. The best time within is if you have a promotion or have been given the opportunity to take on new responsibilities. That's the time to say,
I'm going to stop sharing this.
Yep. That's the time to say, hey, I really appreciate this. I'm honored. Let's talk about, I'd like to talk about what I see as being an appropriate package going forward. It could be, it probably is, and maybe direct compensation. Maybe there are other non-cash forms of compensation, stock options, those are available. Other typical benefits from the array of benefits, maybe there are some of those that are available to some but not all employees that make a big difference for the employee. And then
I know for a lot of people, I know they want to work from home at least one day a week, because those of you who have been able to, if you're able to work from home, it saves you the commute. You don't have to spend as much on getting dressed and all that. You can really get a lot done. And yet it depends on the company culture. Also having more days off or flex time, there's all kinds of benefits. Let's look at some of the questions that we have here. Be yourself. What is yourself? What if you were a bad negotiator? Yeah, I thought of that too. Being intimidated.
Okay, first of all, I'd ask, what is it that makes you classify as a bad negotiator?
See if you can get more information.
Give me
Mary Pat.
Give me some examples, some history, and then I would say perhaps what you can do, given that knowledge of yourself, is to do some work and figure out what your style is, and with that style, how to approach a negotiation. So also you can strategize, for example, in negotiations. If you want to avoid negotiations, get somebody else involved. There are many options there. But I would say there's a good negotiator.
People pleasing, given too easily. That's what she's talking about.
Too much of a people pleaser. So one way is just practice and do simulations. Laura and I were talking about that. There are lots of people giving workshops on negotiation and practicums. And in fact, I am offering one here in the Charleston area before Memorial Day in May. So I welcome your inquiries on that. It's harder to practice negotiating in a real setting. If you have people that will do role playing, you can do that. There are publishers of case studies, and that's a foundation of the way I teach, is through case studies where people are doing the work and it's not just me talking at them. You can do that. It takes discipline and patience. And my sense is, particularly with massive online courses, there will be more opportunity to practice things like negotiation as a distance learning thing.
And I want to jump in and add my 2 cents, which is not as negotiating, but in being persuasive and asking for things, like to practice asking for things. Like I started off asking for water with no ice, because everybody here in the South, we drink ice water. And even if somebody's bringing me a glass of ice water, I'll say, I'm sorry, would you please bring me a glass of water with no ice? So something as simple as that, dressing on the side, I don't know, just asking people for things. I think because because I know inside what that people pleaser brain is like, and you just don't want to rock the boat, and you think, oh, it's not that important. Well, it's better. And also you can think of motivating yourself, showing other people that a people pleaser can also ask for things.
Do you send your food back because it's not prepared to your liking?
Well, I'm usually I would if it weren't, but I'm not. I mean, I'm pretty good about
You're not a
eating.
picky eater.
No,
not like the 3-year-old.
No, I'm like
okay,
ready to eat it.
All right.
Pre-learning versus listening and asking good questions. So, what are good questions, and what are things like to study before? That's really good, Sarah. Like, what would you like?
Is this in the context of an actual negotiation, meaning do your homework?
Well, I know Sarah works for herself, so maybe she's thinking like those of us who work for ourselves, we have to deal with, we don't know the budget. So what's a good way to suss out how much money they have?
In the context of when you're asking for...
Like you're going to provide a service for a company, because I know Sarah has her own company.
Right. I think in that regard, it's fair to ask, and maybe you set it up as a 2-stage process so that you collect as much information as you can in phase 1 and then come back with your proposal in that context. Then you know where the parameters are. And of course, what they, in effect, what you've done in the the first phase of the process, that in and of itself is a negotiation. If you ask them what their budget is, they may give you a number that's actually lower than what they're willing to spend. So you got to think about, don't take those things with a grain of salt, but at least it stakes out what the general expectations
right, what the
are.
ballpark might be. Yeah, she's having a request for a proposal, content, scope of project. Many times what they want, not what they need. Yeah, that's true. A lot of times, you're dealing with a client who doesn't understand what they need. And
Sarah, we, happy to talk about this offline. I've experienced that both in investment banking and in the coaching and training, where people think they want to coaching, it's about this. Well, you talk to them, and actually when you get into it, it's really about something else.
Absolutely. I have
kind of like
all the time.
That's kind of like the key, and everything unravels. So when you have a situation like that, or if you anticipate it, that's when you have that, first meeting, call it discovery or orientation, and where you're trying to come away with, what is this really about? What are we really trying to solve? And that's, and then you can go back and develop the solution to address the real issue.
Oh yes, and I'm going to go into something Peter and I discussed yesterday about the wine versus what. But the rest of you who haven't put in any questions, take advantage that we have Peter here to get some specific, some laser coaching or helping out. Discovery is the key word. But we talked about yesterday the situation, because I have clients who are in corporate, and they're like, we talked about this, that the big boss comes up with this great idea, and he passes it down, and it rides to the manager or the director, and they're like, here's this new project, and the person is already up to here in the work. And maybe they're not even the best person to do it. And of course, my brain is thinking, why do I have to do this? And you said that was really not the best approach.
Yeah, I would just quit. No.
That's so empowering. Bye.
Yeah. So if you take that, drawing on some of the things that we discussed, if you are that person, what are your options? What do you do? First, collect information about this project. What's the objective? Who really wants it? Who's going to help? Where are the gears and levers that you may be able to address in thinking about alternatives? Laura said this person feels that they're not the best person to
or they don't have
with.
the bandwidth,
They don't have the bandwidth. That's part of not being the best person at that time to deal with it.
Okay.
So then you gotta, once you've figured out, what's this for, what the goals are, what's needed to do it, then come up with a proposal, or at least part of the proposal, to say, here's a better way to do it. And that better way to do it doesn't involve me. And oh, by the way, because here's what I am doing, and that's my greater and better use for this organization. I'm here to accomplish this mission. You're not helping me. I'm not helping the company get to where it needs to go by doing this. Here's a better way to do it. And in fact, it'll get done better, quicker, and more appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great insight, because I find that some people don't speak up. They're afraid of blowback. Or if they do speak up, it's seen as complaining, and they are maybe justifiably right that I don't have the bandwidth. This is not good for my team. But really, so instead of just saying I can't or it's not good, to propose an alternative way of getting the project done. Okay, what else? We'll stay on as long as there are questions. People, take advantage. Peter is here. I will make him answer and give you good advice to go back to your afternoon and rock it.
Yeah. Well, if anybody, I'm going to say one thing, and I think you're going to make the slides.
Yeah, I'm going to include that in you'll get an email after this, and then there'll be a link to that slide.
You'll find two other slides, so I might as well point them out right now. One is another simple chart called the situational matrix, and in going in and strategizing about how to negotiate, it balances off the perceived conflict over the stakes. High conflict, low conflict. And for example, in relationships, marriage, friendship, your work team, people are trying to cooperate. On the other hand, if it is a business partnership, joint venture, merger, or divorce, house sale, a transaction, the conflict over stakes, it's high. There's a certain amount of the pie. Okay, we talk about increasing the pie, but what you what the other party doesn't get, you get, and vice versa. And then there's, what's the future relationship? How important is that between the parties? If you are selling your car, your used car, goodbye. You really don't care a whole lot about the relationship unless it's a relative or friend. On the other hand, if you're going to be working with somebody, it's important to have a great working relationship, you have to take that into account.
That's very important.
So, and then there's tacit coordination. That's low conflict, low future relationship. How about picking your seat in an airplane? You're only going to sit there for the flight. Chances are you don't know the person. On the other hand, everybody knows how to, or generally knows how to take their seat and be cooperative. It doesn't need explaining.
You have another comment on your slide: self-interest versus self-esteem. And those of you who don't have questions while Peter answers this, talk about self. How do you find the balance? I think it's really selling the value, but I want people to share your takeaways.
Self-interest versus self-esteem. How does one find the balance? It really depends. That's a good question. It probably requires a longer answer and a discussion because it depends on the context. But I think you can you can negotiate both in a self-interested way and maintain your self-esteem. Again, we said, you got to stick. You stick with your fundamental principles. Typically, your ethics are always your ethics. The other side may not be ethical, and you are going to do what's right for you, and what's right as the overall goal for either you, if you're a sole proprietor, or you're going to try and fulfill the mission of your enterprise. That is all of a piece. So maybe the best thing is talk offline and we can discuss specific examples.
Right. But I think for me, the takeaway is, selling the value of what you're bringing to the table, which is so important. All right, Cheryl, Kay, Lisa, Meredith, we haven't heard from you. I would love for you to share a takeaway, ask a question, speak up, your point of view about negotiating. Because like Peter, you don't have to be a banker to be negotiating. We're negotiating all the time, asking for extra tzatziki sauce is a form of negotiation.
Well, I'll tell you another context we haven't talked to is how about contractors working on your home, especially if it's a complicated
because I'm about to redo my bathroom.
There's a whole lot of stuff that is squishy in dealing with contractors. So that's a good way to go through this checklist. That's a good way to practice negotiation. How much are you going to do? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Are you going to show up when you say you're going to show up?
And what happens if these things are not met?
Right.
Especially I didn't even know you could negotiate. I thought that you just had to take what they know.
Well, you can.
Okay. Lesson learned.
You can.
Good.
Most home contractors are challenging counterparties for various reasons.
Yes.
But that's a good way to practice.
Okay. So if you're going to have your bathroom remodeled, like I am, ask for more.
Yep.
Ask for something. What would you ask for? Like to get it done sooner, or some kind of I would be concerned of if what you say doesn't happen, then what?
Right. It's really the contingencies, and to be very clear that you're aware that there may be contingencies and what your expectations are.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this is your last chance to speak up. I'm going to send you copies of the slides, which you didn't even see them all. And on that, Peter has some resources for getting better. Are they all books? Or
So I listed books, 4 books. They're all, one is the classic Getting to Yes, and that came out of Harvard Law School, Professor Roger Fisher. Was written years ago. It's a classic. Richard Shell's book, another guy at Wharton who's a real top negotiator, Stuart Diamond, and then Give and Take by Adam Grant. And Lisa Olszewski told me that her daughter, when she was an undergrad at Michigan, was a research associate while Adam was getting his PhD there. He talks about trade-offs and networking, and much of what he talks about is translatable into negotiation. Other resources, if you search online, there's a lot of stuff on negotiation and bargaining. There are case studies, or just come back to me and we can have a quick conversation. I can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll put your email on the follow-up emails too. Or if you need to talk to Peter, we can get you in touch with Peter. Thank you so much for coming. And we have a question another question here. How do you handle the next round? Say, i.e., you ask for 10K, they say 5. Do you split the difference? What if they refuse to budge? Lisa, good question.
Oh, Lisa, I knew you would challenge me. Good question. Splitting the difference is what Richard Shell refers to as a norm. Often that's the case. However, you can, there's the opportunity if 5,000, if you ask for 10,000 and 5,000 was your goal, then that might be good. Or if you really wanted 10,000, maybe we should say ask for more than you're willing to go for. So your goal should have been, your ask should have been 15. So we can rethink that one. Or if you come back and say we'll split the difference at 7,500, maybe what you say is split the difference at 7,500, and instead of that 2,500 that I asked for that you're not giving me, how about a package of things that represent value to you as the employee? May not be that it costs anything for the company. Maybe you get a better parking space. Maybe you have some kind of something that allows you to get what you want. get a coach, or something that may not even be monetary, but that represents something that you'd like to have. Those are possibilities. So again, it's adding all the components in there and putting them on the table to give yourself more elements of value that are important to you to work with.
All right. So I just want to close with one announcement that none of you, I don't think anybody here knows, and it's really not that related, but kind of is. Next week is National Introvert Week. Is that not the coolest thing? All right, guys, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for showing up. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Laugh.